The aim of my paper is to examine developments in pottery manufacture at Mitrou, East Lokris, between the end of the 14th and the very beginning of the 12th century BC, and to investigate their potential meaning in the wider socio-political context of central Greece. More specifically, significant choices made by the potters at different stages of the production process are discussed to determine whether and how they reflect the irreversible crisis of the Mycenaean palatial system during the second half of the late Helladic 3B. In order to achieve this goal, Mitrou's LH3A2 late, LH3B1, and LH3B2 late ceramic assemblage, early mature and final palatial periods, are compared with the evidence from two other significant horizons dating to previous phases of Mycenaean civilization, specifically LH2A, early pre-palatial period, and LH3A2 early, final pre-palatial period. My paper is subdivided into 4 sections. The first includes a brief overview of Mitrou's political trajectories from the beginning of the Late Bronze Age to the end of the Mycenaean palatial period. The second presents the methodological approach followed within this paper. The third provides the relevant information on Mitrou pottery practices during the periods of interest. The fourth and final section includes a discussion on the data and some final statements. I begin with a brief overview of Mitrou's political trajectories. The information discussed in this section is particularly important for understanding the data provided by the analysis of Mitrou ceramics within their wider and social and economic context. Previous studies on the subject by directors of the Mitrou archaeological project, as well as myself, have suggested that during the pre-palatial period, Mitrou was an important independent center in East Lokris. Evidence for the emergence of political elite is apparent since the first half of LH1, when two monumental complexes named Building H and D were constructed in connection with an orthogonal network of paved roads. During the second half of LH1, a large built chamber tomb called Tomb 73 was constructed in the northwest corner of Building D, obliterating much of the previous architecture. Building D and its elite tomb continued to be used until the end of the pre-palatial period. Although robbed already in antiquity, the quality of the finds recovered from the Tomb 73, including jewelry, weapons, and ceramics, demonstrates the high status and prosperity of the deceased. The pre-palatial period at Mitrou was brought to a close by a fire destruction affecting the northeast excavation sector of the site during LH3A2 early. After this event, it is likely that Mitrou and East Lokris fell under the sphere of influence of a palatial authority that, based on topographic evidence, may have been Orchomenos. This political scenario, however, probably changed towards the end of LH3B. In fact, the LH3B2 late deposits from Mitrou match closely the ceramics dating the destruction of the palatial building at Thebes, but are later than the materials dating the destruction of Gla, which is assignable to LH3B2 early. The materials from Orchomenos are poorly published. However, it is generally assumed that Orchomenos may have been destroyed more or less at the same time as Gla, because these two sites were strongly interconnected. These simple chronological data, in addition to other significant contextual information that I have discussed elsewhere, indicate that Mitrou and East Lokris may have passed from Orchomenos to Theban control during LH3B2 late. I now move to the methodology followed for the analysis of Mitrou's ceramics. Studies on Mycenaean palaces and ceramic production have not reached common conclusions. Based on the evidence from room 20 at Pylos in 1984, James Wright suggested that individual potters' shops, which contributed to the palatial economy, may have been controlled by the palace bureaucracy. In 2007, however, Michael Galati maintained that there is no definitive evidence to support Wright's hypothesis. At the same time, Galati suggested that Pylian elites may have contributed to the commercialization of ceramic production. More specifically, considering their prominent concern for wealth goods, palatial administrators may have had a greater interest in the circulation of kailikis and other fine fabric vases than utilitarian containers. Despite the occurrence of different views on the extent of palatial direct control over pottery production, Galati's point on the iconic, if not political, value of certain fine vessel types has received consensus among scholars, including most recently Julie Hruby. As the interplay between socio-political changes and potting practices at Mitrou during the Mycenaean palatial period is the subject of my paper, I focused my analysis not on the entire body of ceramics from this site, but rather on the so-called tableware. This term is defined here in its broader possible meaning as that fraction of the pottery assemblage which includes fine and medium coarse vessels for eating, drinking, mixing, ladling, and pouring purposes, as well as higher end of utilitarian and ritual ceramic vases such as alabastra, raita, ascoi, etc. Following in the footsteps of Aledis van der Mortel's analysis of pottery changes and the transition from the Minoan proto-palatial to neo-palatial period in Crete, the present study of Mitrou's tableware is primarily focused on three significant steps of the manufacturing process: clay preparation, formation of the vessel's body, and surface treatment. In the cases of the second, for the first of these steps, all of the tableware vessels from Mitrou's significant pottery deposits dating to the periods under the study were counted and charted for statistical purposes. In the case of the second and the third step, on the other hand, only a subsample of the entire assemblage was available for statistical analysis. This subsample consists of a relatively high number of vessels that have been inventoried for publication. For publication purposes and thus received in-depth individual recording and documentation. The criteria for the selection of inventoried pots were designed to collect a representative sample of the main pottery tendencies on a phase-by-phase basis. The selection was almost entirely the result of the work of a single scholar, myself, thus resulting in a comparatively even distribution of success and failure in the choice throughout the various deposits. In addition to these three features, 5 other important aspects concerning finishing, appendages, attachments, quality of the paint, complexity of decoration, and firing are also taken into consideration within the paper. For those additional features, however, no attempt for systematic counts was made. Instead, my research was conducted through a methodical and consistent observation, description, and documentation of the broader diachronic tendencies represented in Mitrou's significant pottery deposits. Blatantly important specimens, such as aginitan vessels, were excluded from any of the analysis conducted in this paper. Before moving to the presentation of the evidence, a final note is needed on the quality, quantity, and distribution of Mitrou's ceramic assemblages. Mitrou is an ideal site to study the long-term significance of cultural and social practices, including ceramic manufacture. In fact, the 2004 to 2008 excavations directed by Aledis van der Mortel and Eleni Zahu brought to light a long habitation sequence spanning from the end of the Neolithic to the end of the Protogeometric period, and included an extremely detailed and unbroken sequence of stratified pottery deposits. Within the exception of LH3B1, all of the phases considered for my study are abundantly represented at the site. Similarly, with the exception of LH3B1, all of the phases analyzed within this paper consist of a diverse array of contexts in terms of site formation processes, including bendable pots from destruction deposits, pits, one-time dump episodes, as well as more fragmented vessels from subsurface terracing fields and garbage dumps or pits. I now move to the presentation of the evidence. For the first step of my analysis, which is focused on clay preparation, I subdivided Mitrou's tableware assemblage into fine and medium coarse fabrics. Fine vessels are characterized by the occurrence of non-plastic inclusions with the grain size no larger than 2 millimeters, a fine to medium density of non-plastic inclusions to the paste, that means 1 to 10% ratio of inclusions to matrix, and a well-sorted texture. On the other hand, medium coarse vessels are typified by non-plastic inclusions ranging from between 2 and 4 millimeters, medium to medium coarse density of non-plastic inclusions to the base, that is 10 to 20% of ratio of inclusions to matrix, and a well to moderately sorted texture. The preparation of finer clay mixes involves a longer process and thus a longer labor investment during the manufacturing process. Mitrou data indicate that the percentage of medium coarse tableware vessels was rather low throughout the periods examined. However, within the palatial period, a gradual increase of the medium coarse fraction can be observed, indicating that the proportion of medium coarse specimens during LH3b2 late is slightly more than double the proportion during LH3a2 late. Comparison with the pre-palatial period shows a diverse picture. The proportion of medium coarse tableware vessels was almost non-existent during LH2A, but raised significantly during LH3A2 early, especially when decorated specimens are considered. For step 2, formation of the vessel's body, I subdivided the sample into 2 broad groups, one including vases constructed by using fully handmade methods, and the other including coil-built and wheel-fashioned, as well as wheel-thrown specimens. Several scholars have associated the gradual spread of the wheel technology in the Aegean to the increase in potter's specialization and the need for more effective production strategies, which led in some instances to a certain degree of mechanization and standardization of the manufacturing process. Mitrou's data on the distribution of forming techniques show a clear and linear diachronic development towards a decrease in the use of fully handmade construction methods. Within the palatial period, almost 8% of Mitrou's tableware vessels were still fully handmade in LH3A2 late. But this technique basically disappeared during LH3B1 and LH3B2 late. The distinction between these two phases, from nothing in LH3B1 back to 1.77% in 3B2 late, is negligible, and it's probably due to the differences in sample size. These data may indicate that the definitive abandonment of fully handmade forming methods at Mitrou may have been connected to changes that occurred at the site during the mature and final stages of the pre-palatial period. For the third analytical step, I lumped all the surface treatments identified at Mitrou into 2 broad groups, characterized respectively by less labor-intensive and more labor-intensive methods. The first group includes smoothing, wiping, and self-slipping, while the second includes burnishing and polishing. Smoothed signifies a non-lustrous, even surface exhibiting no obvious tool marks. Wiped indicates a non-lustrous, even surface characterized by the presence of parallel groups of fine striations, which were produced by the tool used to smooth the vessel. Burnish signifies a lustrous surface on which the marks of the tool used to smooth the vase and to give it a luster are clearly visible. Polished indicates a lustrous surface on which the marks of the tool used to smooth the vase and to give it luster are not visible. Finally, following Jeremy Rutter's definition, by self-slipping I mean a simpler and less labor-intensive form of burnishing. Mitrou's data on the diachronic distribution of surface treatments shows a continuous decrease in the use of labor-intensive methods. It is important to observe, however, that until the early palatial period, that is 3A2 late, burnishing and polishing are still largely more common than self-slipping, wiping, and smoothing. During 3B1, more and less intensive labor methods are roughly equally represented. By the end of the palatial period, in LH3B2 late, on the other hand, less intensive labor methods represent circa 60% of the sample. Another way to look at broad trends in surface treatments is to observe the percentages of monochrome interiors in open shapes with a pattern or linear exterior decoration. This approach is meaningful only when less labor-intensive surface treatments are comparatively popular. In fact, when simpler treatments are widespread, coating interiors with a solid paint may not represent simply a decorative preference, but also an easier and faster way to isolate the surface of the pots from liquid and solid contents without the need for more labor-intensive solutions such as polishing and burnishing. Bearing this in mind, if we ignore LH2A, when the occurrence of less labor-intensive surface treatments is only around 15%, the increased preference for monochrome interiors during the examined phases follows again a clear and linear diachronic pattern with 3B1 and most prominently 3B2 late standing out as moments of dramatic growth. The progressive tendency towards less intensive labor methods from the pre-palatial to the palatial period at Mitrou with a clearly pronounced peak during 3B2 late is confirmed by the observation of other relevant features of the ceramic assemblage. First, there is a decrease of the smoothing or rilling from the interior surfaces of open and closed shapes. Second, comparatively abrupt attachments of appendages, especially handles and necks, become gradually more frequent. Third, there is a consistent decrease in paint quality, which can be observed in the growing occurrence through time of dull-painted specimens. Fourth, there is an obvious diachronic increase of simple decorative styles, which eventually led to the complete disappearance of complex decorative schemes in the later part of the palatial period, 3B1 and 3B2 late. I'm referring in particular to the disappearance of what Arne Furumark defines as tectonic decoration. In contrast with zonal decoration, tectonic decoration implies the compositional ability of the painter to adapt complex patterns, especially pictorial, zoomorphic, or vegetal motifs, to the three-dimensional space surface of the vessel. Fifth, an increasing concern for the ability to achieve a complete firing process is demonstrated by the relatively common occurrence of one or multiple holes on the handles of larger shapes, such as craters, amphoras, jugs, and hydras. Concluding this presentation of the evidence, okay. There's some kind of delay. Yeah. Concluding this presentation of the evidence, it may be relevant to notice a final interesting feature which distinguishes Mitrou 3B2 late ceramics from the previous phases. This is the emergence of idiosyncrasies, which may be interpreted as an initial form of regionalism. These local preferences include the occurrence of open shapes with a group of thin lines framed by two thicker bands, the so-called Boeotian stripe, the frequency of semiglobular cups with linear decoration on the monochrome interior, the dearth of medium band deep balls, the continuation of patterned shallow cups, and the occurrence of group A deep balls decorated with different patterns between the two main sides. The emergence of local idiosyncrasies during 3B2 late is in a sharp contrast with the evidence from LH3A2 late and 3B1 when the ceramic assemblage at the site was in harmony with the mainstream Mycenaean repertoire of the central and southern Greek mainland. I conclude my paper with a brief discussion of the data and some final statements. The analysis of the evidence suggests the existence of a shift at Mitrou from elaborate manufacturing methods characteristic of the pre-palatial period towards simpler labor-cut methods typical of the palatial period. The shift corresponds to Mitrou's transition from an independent, locally emerging center in East Lokris to a secondary center under a palatial polity, which may have been initially orchomenos, and then, following the destruction of Gla, at the end of 3B2 early, Thebes. Within the palatial period, however, significant differences emerge between the 3A2 late, 3B1, and 3B2 late ceramic assemblages, with the latter representing a more extreme move towards simplification as compared to previous Mycenaean potting practices at the site. In addition, while LH3A2 and 3B1 ceramics largely conform to the so-called Mycenaean koine, LH3B2 pottery included some idiosyncrasies that suggest an initial shift towards regionalism. These facts imply the existence of changed socioeconomic and political condition between 3A2 3B1, and 3B2 Throughout these three phases, less labor-intensive methods were possibly the result of cost controlling and mass production strategies. These strategies may have been favored by the competitive environment determined by palatial regional and supra-regional trade networks, which would require more efficient and time-saving approaches. However, the extreme reduction in labor of LH3B2 potters, as well as the introduction of local preferences, require additional explanations. The crisis of Mycenaean palatial society may have been one of the factors impacting production standards at Mitrou at the transition between the 13th and the 12th century BC. More specifically, growing competition between Thebes and Orchomenos over the rich agricultural supplies of the Copaic basin may have led to an increasingly hostile environment, which eventually culminated in the destruction of Gla and a general destabilization of the whole region. Political upheaval could have contributed to a drop in the quality of manufacturing and the development of regionalism as an outcome of economic instability and increasingly unsafe trade conditions in the market networks. Obviously, other factors such as new cultural choices may also have played a role. For example, changes in potters' preferences and or different consumer demands may also have been important. In fact, the simpler stylistic developments initiated slightly before 1200 BC constitute a major element of continuity between late LH3B and LH3C ceramics, as well as a hallmark of LH3C pottery productions on the Greek mainland throughout the end of the Bronze Age. I would like to conclude my paper emphasizing the wider implications of the Mitrou case study with reference to the very subject of this workshop. I believe that the results of my analysis support a positive answer to the main question raised by the organizers and suggest that specific choices in the manufacturing process may indeed reflect periods of disruptions, crisis, and or transformation of socio-political, economic, and environmental conditions. These choices can be identified through a thorough examination of the ceramic record and are better understood when contextual evidence from multiple successive phases is available at the site. Regional and supra-regional level, as in the Mitrou's case study. Thank you very much for your attention.